Obviously, I'm recording this before you get to see it, so we don't know if it's morning or evening when you're watching these lectures, but I'll say welcome. We'll move on to another modern theory of ethics. We've talked about utilitarianism and Kantianism. Now we're going to talk about what's called the social contract theory. And it introduces a very important idea called the state of nature. And the place to begin is with a philosopher named Thomas Hobbes. He was born, he said of himself that he was born a twin to fear. So this is a little test of your English history knowledge. And some of you will know this. 1588. Why were the English afraid in 1588? Because Queen Elizabeth, this kind of puts us into the historical time frame, Queen Elizabeth had been rewarding the English sea dogs, from the Spanish point of view, pirates, who were interfering with the Spanish Empire in the New World, which was making Spain tremendously rich and the most powerful country in Europe. And so Philip of Spain was tired of it, and he was going to invade England, and 1588 was the year of the Spanish Armada, and all England was quaking. Turns out that Thomas Hobbes lived a very long time, to 1679. The Spanish Armada was defeated mostly by weather, but also by the English Navy. And England was not invaded. They maintained their independence. And in the new century, when Thomas Hobbes is a young man, religious problems, religious civil war comes to England. The English Civil War between the Puritans and other Protestants. See, England had become a Protestant country with Elizabeth's father in 1560s. And so now in the 1600s, after Elizabeth dies, the Protestants, it's Protestant versus Protestant. It's not Catholics in England anymore, but you have the Puritans who want to make the church pure, who overthrow the king eventually, and Charles I actually is executed. Thomas Hobbes lived through the English Civil War. So here's his questions. What would life be like if there was no central authority to make people do what they promised to do? He thinks, now he lived through a civil war, but Thomas Hobbes thinks that anybody, any good thinker, any philosopher, if you think carefully, will be able to figure out what the state of nature would be like. If people live in perfect freedom, that is, they can do whatever they like, what would life be like? There are 4 conditions that would determine what goes on in the state of nature. First of all, everybody has certain needs. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need clean water. In ancient, medieval world, getting clean water was not hard to do. We need clean air. They didn't even think about getting clean air, just go outside and breathe. We need these things. In England, like in Oregon, you need shelter because it's cold and rainy for half of the year. You don't have any choice about this. You need these things. Secondly, in the state of nature, there is a scarcity of goods because the amount of food and shelter and other necessities, clothing, that people need don't just occur naturally. You have to work for them, and there's a scarcity of them. So there isn't enough to go around. And in the state of nature where there is no power to make people keep their promises, there is essential equality. Now, you might think this isn't true, but I can illustrate. Think of the biggest, meanest, strongest defensive lineman on the George Fox football team. A big dude. In the state of nature, he can take your stuff, but he's got to sleep sometime. And so you can imagine the smallest, meekest co-ed on campus who notices when he's asleep, and she has a rock. She can sneak up and bash his head in. There is essential equality of power in the state of nature. Anybody can kill anybody else. And in the state of nature, people have limited altruism. When it really comes to starving to death, very few of us are willing to give up our food. So, if there is no central power to make people do what they want, in the state of nature, says Hobbes, life is not very good. In fact, it's horrible. Here's a quote. In such condition, there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation or use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. In the state of nature, who would grow a garden? It takes a lot of work to grow a garden, and the fruit of it comes some months later. Your neighbor may come in and steal the fruit of your garden. You not only have to grow the garden, you have to somehow protect the garden. So Hobbes says there's not going to be any agriculture. Who's going to sail away to a distant land and bring back goods if his neighbor can steal his children or enslave his children and wife? So you all get to eat what you grow today or what you capture today. You get to live in the shelter that you make today. It's a miserable life in the state of nature. And Hobbes thinks this mental experiment tells us a lot about human beings and a lot about our society. We don't live in the state of nature. And Hobbes says the reason is we're too smart. Notice that this has a connection to the modern theories of utilitarianism and Kantianism, both of which said that ethics is grounded in our rationality. Hobbes makes a similar modern move. He says, we don't live in the state of nature because we're too smart. The passions that incline men to peace are fear of death, desire of things that are necessary to commodious living, and a hope by their industry to obtain them. We want to live better lives. And reason suggests convenient articles of peace, upon which men may be drawn to agreement. These articles are they which otherwise are called the laws of nature. Hobbes knows that for a long time, Thomas Aquinas and many other philosophers have talked about natural law. Hobbes says there's no such thing as natural law. That what people call natural law are really the agreements that people have made so that they don't live in the state of nature. We're rational beings. We're too smart for that. Notice the modern move toward reason. Reason suggests convenient articles of peace. And the reason, why do we accept the contract? Well, we're all motivated. The final cause, end, or design of men who naturally love liberty and dominion over others, in the introduction of that restraint upon themselves in which we see them live in commonwealths, is the foresight of their own preservation and of a more contented life thereby. That is to say, of getting themselves out of that miserable condition of war which is necessarily consequent to the natural passions of men. Human beings can see that the state of nature is so bad, we are willing to give up our natural freedom to do anything we want, and instead, we'll obey the laws of the queen or the king. And it's good for us to obey the laws of the queen, because then we can have contracts. I can build my boat and sail away and come back, and if you have stolen my children, I can sue you. So we can depend on each other because we give up authority to government. So, in social contract theory, the rules are the rules that we agree to for our mutual benefit. That's the basic idea. We escape the state of nature by agreeing to the rules. Now, there's a complicating factor here. Are the rules we actually agree to, real social contracts? Or are the rules we would agree to in an ideal situation? I can illustrate the difference. Suppose the question is, should women have the right to vote? There are some countries in the world today where if you went there and if you had a good, accurate scientific poll of the women, they would say, no, women should not have the right to vote. You can imagine countries where this is the truth. Does this mean that in those countries where the women themselves agree that, oh no, women should not have the right to vote, that the social contract should say women should not get the right to vote? Many of us from liberal democracies would say something else. We would say, if these women in these countries were properly educated, if they weren't taught that men are superior to women, if they weren't taught and indoctrinated in the idea that only men should rule, then they wouldn't agree. So there's a difference between the actual social contract that these women would agree to and the ideal social contract. That difference is going to come back later as we examine social contract theory. Now, I've already given the main idea of the social contract theory, that human beings agree together on rules, and morality and politics is about the rules, and we agree to them for our mutual benefit. There's a lot more to be said, though, and that's why we have to have a second lecture on social contract theory next time.